And welcome everybody to our latest desktop documentaries webinar. And I'm really absolutely thrilled today to welcome Bruce Young. Bruce and I met on this very webinar. What was it, 3 years ago, Bruce? 2, 3, 5, 10?
4 years ago, Peter.
4 years ago.
2021, yeah.
Never met. And Bruce pitched me a story. And I executive produce or get engaged with very few films. And we are now have a completed movie, will be distributed worldwide, will be on PBS's exclusive nature platform. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So it's great to have you all here. We'll cover as much material as we can. I think we could talk for hours about our experience with this lovely film. But we'll hand over questions for Q&A, and Caitlin will moderate. So thank you, Caitlin. So Bruce, just by the way, you're in Cape Town, I'm in Brooklyn, Caitlin's in Mexico, and Gareth from Desktop Documentaries is in the UK. So we're really spread wild. So let's start, Bruce. Tell us about the concept for this film, how you discovered it, and take us through to you're joining us on this desktop documentaries webinar.
Peter, do you want to show them the first couple of minutes of the film and then they'll get a sense of what we're talking about? Or shall I jump in right now and go from my early links with pangolins?
Yeah, let's jump in and show, this is 2 minutes of the trailer, is that correct?
Yeah, even less, yeah. So that'll just give you a sense of what we're talking about. And then when I'm referring to the animal, which a lot of people don't know about, or some of the characters, you'll have a visual for them. So shall we roll with that, Caitlin?
This is Kosha, and her journey would change everything we thought we knew about ground pangolins. This rescued pup pushed the limits of pangolin conservation, defying all expectations. She came back from the brink and returned to the wild. But that's not the end of the story. It's just the beginning.
I was watching the
Kosha, meaning the precious one in Shona, is the longest tracked pangolin in history. Over the last 7 years, she's taught us more than we can share here. But the greatest surprise, she gave birth in the wild. A world first. Once thought impossible. In a time where pangolins are vanishing before we truly understand them, Kosha has become our greatest teacher.
So Bruce,
Thank you.
how did you discover the story?
Let me back up a little bit and tell you how I got involved with pangolins. I've been involved in the film industry all my life in various capacities. 11 years living in the US, in New York and LA, and then back to South Africa. And while I was back in SA, I got involved in wildlife documentary filmmaking. I'd been an actor, I'd been a assistant director in LA, I'd been a writer, and I was asked to write a script for a wildlife documentary, and that sort of led me into this world. And most notably in that role, I was involved in a film called Bloodlines, which was an issue-driven film about the canned lion hunting industry in South Africa, where lions are bred on farms and then sold to international hunters as wild lions. And that film, Bloodlines, was a campaign film designed to eventually shut down that industry. We released that in 2015, and it has done exactly that. We're in the process, South African government is in the process of changing the laws around the lion breeding. So that's how I got involved in from Hollywood, some performances on camera, to small but far more important to me at this stage of my life, smaller films that had real issues at their heart. After Bloodlines, a friend of mine came to me and said, would I help him make a film about pangolins? And I kind of knew what they were, but I didn't know why we would want to make a film about them, because no one ever sees them. They're so mysterious, so elusive. And then he told me that they're the most trafficked mammals on the planet. And so suddenly I got interested. My story brain went, okay, so what's going on with these guys? And we made a film about the 4 African pangolin species called Eye of the Pangolin, which again was part of a campaign to raise awareness about these animals, because nothing can be done about them unless people know about them. So we traveled all over Africa trying to get these four African species on film. And you'll have to watch the film on YouTube to find out if we did get them all on film. But it led me into a relationship with a woman called Lisa Highwood, who is the sort of doyenne of pangolin conservation in Africa. In fact, she's internationally renowned as one of the most accomplished and seriously authentic pangolin conservationists in the world. And that took us into a second film. Eye of the Pangolin was the first, and Lisa immediately said when I met her that she wanted to make a second one. And it was to go deeper and further into the whole pangolin trafficking story. And so we started working on a follow-up to Eye of the Pangolin, a movie called Scales. And while we were busy with that, she called me one day and she said, we've got another story, which we think is a good news story about pangolins, because there's so little hope and optimism in the pangolin world. And this is a good one. Do you think you could help us make a film about that? And that was the first, that call happened in December of 2019. And that was the beginning of this journey to where we are today with a film that has been delivered to PBS Nature. And that's what Peter and I are going to talk about today, because it was a good story. Immediately, Lisa told me about it. I thought, there's an amazing story here. Yes, Lisa, we would love to help you make this film. It's, as I'm sure all of you know, it's every filmmaker's dream when you come across material or a situation or a character or a story that just begs to be told. And so it proved, because we pitched it to, everyone I took it to in those early days really liked the story. First of all, I went to my partners on the Scales film here in Cape Town, who have a production company called Silver Bullet Films, and they immediately saw the potential. Wayne DeLange is the director and Diana Keem is the producer. And so the three of us got together and developed this idea and started pitching it. And we did a number of international pitches in 2020 and through to 2021, and just people would like the story, but said no eventually, or disappeared sometimes as interest waned. And then I started doing a desktop documentaries course run by Peter. And it was a great course. I mean, it was giving me it was called Pitching to Netflix. And it was giving me enormous insight into my new role as a producer, because I'd been many things, but I'd now started producing. And this course really made me aware of how you had to go big and develop relationships as much as possible. So on a trip to LA from South Africa late in 2021, I just finished doing that course, and I was meeting with a producer and I mentioned the course because it had made a big impact on me. And he said, oh, I know, Peter. Do you want me to introduce you? And so he did. And now maybe I can ask you a question, Peter. What was it about that initial approach that I made from LA that day that piqued your interest? Why did you take my call? Why did you say let's have a chat?
Oh, thank you, Bruce, and thanks for telling us the backstory. And there's no simple kind of A to B with these films. So, why did I respond so favorably to you? I think first of all, the pitch was by you. I mean, I recognized that you were for real, that you were somebody. You just make that that immediate judgment about character. Here's somebody that I can work with that's going to be efficient, open, and honorable in however we proceed. So that gets me to pay attention. And then there's the story itself. And by the way, I get involved in very few projects. I'm a consultant and a publisher and an industry analyst. And the previous film I did was also a wildlife film about the osprey. So I heard the story itself. I really liked because it ticked my three boxes. There was, first of all, you had unique access to the Tiki Haywood Foundation, and 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 there's a really distinctive story coming out there that nobody else is going to outcompete you for. And secondly, there's like a big character, in this case, maybe more than one big character, but there's particularly Kosha, the pangolin, who is adopted from who's rescued as a tiny little pup, and then, as you saw in the preview, finally gives birth in the wild after she's reintroduced to the wild. And I mean, I've watched the film like two or three times now, and each time I get tears. I so identify with her. So I saw it as a sweet story, and I want to be involved in sweet, positive stories, particularly with the world that we've, been living in recently. So we've got a unique access, big character, and then finally high stakes. We've got high stakes for the pangolin herself, the character. Is she going to perish? Is she going to be readapted? Will she readapt to the wild? How will she do? And then big stakes for the conservationists, the preservationists who are working with her. And then finally, big stakes for the species. And many of us remember that the pangolin was involved potentially in the spread of COVID in the Wuhan market. So there are threads of big stakes going on there too. So, your character, what you bring to the project, and then the properties of the story. So there you go. That's what attracted me to it and to working with you, Bruce.
Well, thank you, Peter. Thank you. It was really quite easy to pitch to you because I'd just done your course and you told me exactly how you like to be pitched to,
I want to say also, I love Africa. I love African stories. I've worked extensively in South Africa. I love Cape Town, and I've worked on several projects in various capacities in South Africa, and that really helped too.
And what happened in that conversation, that initial conversation late in 2021, was that Peter said to me that he saw a very clear path for the film. And it was to a connection of his in Germany, a writer who'd done a lot of work with Terramata Film Studios, and they had done a number of projects with PBS Nature. And so Peter got that instinct. His many years in the business sort of instinctively saw a path for this film. And it's really amazing to look back now and see that, yes, it took a few years, and yes, there were a number of stumbling blocks in the way, but that's exactly what's happened. So your instinct really paid off there, Peter, and it was you and I liked you, you liked me, and on we went. And looking back now, the project has been a really, really a fortunate series of incidents that has led to this situation where we are today with a film about to air on PBS Nature.
Yeah, let me tell you about that path, and you're absolutely right. I saw a path that was about an inch wide, because this is an incredibly competitive universe, right? To get a documentary of this kind funded, the budget would be somewhere around about $500,000. Remember, an Attenborough film might have a budget of 2-3 million, but so we're looking at a benchmark. Raising $500,000 to make a film like this is tough, and there are literally, thousands of filmmakers who want to have a piece of that action. So it's a competitive landscape. PBS Nature is the leading strand in nature in the US and probably worldwide, and therefore that's very competitive. So so how do we find our way to the money? And so I have a really valued friend and colleague, Ruth Berry, who you can read about, is promoted in my newsletter, Documentary Business. You can particularly read the case study about her film that she made on Senegal, which is a Senegal space program. And she recognized that story from a footnote in some science publication. And then she said, that's amazing. And she created this whole pitch and ended up getting it funded. And the film is going to be recognized in Venice in the next week or so at a festival there. So I knew that Ruth had a fantastic ability to spin small stories into getting the attention of the powers that have the money. And she also has a very strong relationship with Terramata Studios, which is a Red Bull company. So they have a giant parent. They're not indulged in any way, but they do have that corporate backing. And they produce a small stream of wildlife films every year. And I knew those, the key executives, Sabine Holzer and Suzanne at Terramata, but I knew that if Ruth liked the film and she took it to Terramata, then we had a hope. Now, the next step was at Terramata, they would put in something like half the financing of the film. They needed PBS almost certainly to contribute the balance. So look, I know very well PBS folks, and I know I could potentially pitch them, but I don't have the credibility or the experience. So we needed Terramata with their financial resources available to pitch PBS. So that was the journey. And I just saw no other path for this film. I didn't think that Netflix would pick it up. It wasn't celebrity driven enough. I didn't think that other streamers would go for it, but I thought we could get to the very prestigious platform through Ruth, Terramata, to PBS Nature, which is executive produced by Fred Kaufman, and that's the story.
Yeah, and Sabine at Terramata and Suzanne Lummer, the executive producer, started pitching it and talking to various people. So it still took nearly 2 years before we finally signed the deal and got a shoot date or shoot window for Zimbabwe last year in June and July of 2024. And there were many balls in the air, not least of all with Lisa Highwood and her team, because she is based in Harare, but where their rehab facility operates out of. And then there's a national park in Zimbabwe, which is where they release the pangolins that have been rehabbed successfully, and they feel that they will survive in the wild. And this is a national park, beautiful area. You'll see in the film that doesn't allow access throughout the year just because of the rainy season. So it's very tricky to manage exactly when to go in, when we had enough daylight hours, because pangolins are essentially nocturnal, although in the winter winter months, they will come out during the dawn light and the dusk light to warm up a little bit. And so it was very tricky getting the exact number of days that we needed in Harare initially, and then Ghana Resort later. But we went up there in June last year and spent 2 weeks in Harare with the rehab facility. And then 10 days down in Ghana Resort with the monitoring team. And I say the monitoring team because the pangolins that they have released there are now fitted with trackers so that they can monitor them and record data, which is critically important for this species because so little is known about them, and it's very hard to conserve a species if you don't know that much about it. And so early on in the story, we came up with this idea that this animal, which had been saved from the illegal wildlife trafficking trade, as a pup, grown up and been rehabbed, was now in the wild, giving us data, giving the team data that has now contributed enormously to the whole conservation issue around pangolin. So that the story idea, I think it was Ruth who came up with it, was that he has an animal that is now giving back to her entire species, and the science aspect of natural history is, as I'm sure many of you know, is quite critical. And so to be able to tell a story which is part of new science is added another thread, added a really strong narrative thread to the whole thing.
And that really matters to both Terramata and PBS. No fake ones.
Yeah. So and there it was. It was there. We just had to become aware of it and include it. What was I was going to say, the other beautiful thing about let's go to the challenges, because there were a number, and one of the main challenges was telling a story that had already happened. Kosha had been rehab during 2018 and returned to the wild late 2018, then into 2019 was being monitored. So this story had happened over a number of years, and telling that story without reenactments, which we weren't keen to do, but with quite a lot of archive footage, that was one of the big challenges. Without relying too much on the archive. So
hey, Bruce, can I jump in and say I forgot about that? One of the appeals that you brought to the program, that you brought to the pitch, is that you had been Tiki Highwood had been recording video of the pangolin story, and so you were coming to the pitch with an archive of really valuable and often very beautiful programming that was relevant to the story.
Yeah, and there was one moment when Lisa was pitching me the story and showing us the archive footage, when I saw that footage of the pup in the burrow underground, which I knew enough now about the whole pangolin world to know that was probably pretty unique footage. And as I saw it, and they were screening it for me, I went, wow, this is the money shot in this film if we ever get it made. And it, as Peter said, it's proving to be the moment that really, really touches people. When you see this animal that was poached, trafficked, rehabbed, and went back into the wild and mated with a wild pangolin and managed to give birth naturally. And she has done a number of times since then. So it's a really, really beautiful, positive story, which really, really has helped through all the way along the line,
Really sweet story. Bruce, we're going to go to Q&A in a second, but I just wanted to make it kind of clear that in this process of taking the project to Ruth and then taking it to Terramata, who then brought it to PBS. They were deeply involved at every stage of the storytelling because they were working with a South African production company that wasn't Attenborough, wasn't someone that they'd worked with in the past. It was a new, it was a new relationship, and it required, therefore, requires particular focus, not necessarily unique focus, but particular focus for everyone to advance kind of creatively to find out that they got the film at the end of the process that Terramata wants, that international distributors want, and that PBS Nature wants. So it's not a question of, hey, pitch, give me the money and we'll give you the film. It's a long, deeply immersed, intertwined creative process.
Yeah. And just to go back to what I said earlier, Peter, about what one of the things I got from your workshop is that, as I'm sure everyone watching here knows, that filmmaking in particular is all about relationships and networking and building positive, constructive, authentic relationships. So that process of Terramata getting to learning to work with us here in Cape Town, myself, Wayne, and Di, learning to go with Ruth's amazing creative energy. Suzanne Lummer as the exec producer was always, I mean, just so positive and constructive. So it's built a network that is the reason for. So it's a good news film story. As Lisa came to us with a good news pangolin story that she wanted us to help them tell. We've had, in retrospect, a really good news filmmaking story, and now the next stage is for it to go out and see if it's a good news story for the viewers, for the market, for the audiences out there.
The viewers are going to love it. Let's, Bruce, unless we need to wrap at this stage, I don't think we do. Why don't we go to Q&A, and Caitlin's going to manage that process. So thank you, Caitlin.
Yes. So we will take questions in the chat. So feel free to write those there. I may call on you depending on your question. But yeah, let's get started with the first one. So in your pitch process, when you pitched to Peter, did you bring a pitch deck? Did you show material? Someone's asking, what's the best idea? So what was your experience, Bruce?
Yeah, Peter had been really clear in his course pitching to Netflix what was required in a pitch deck. So I learned a lot from that. And then we had created a little sizzle reel, a really lean little piece, because we hadn't shot anything yet. It was really out of the archives of Lisa's archives, which she'd given us, and using some footage from my previous pangolin films. That's what, because the sizzle was critical just to give a sense of the story. And when I went back and watched that sizzle just the other day, prepping for this chat, I was quite surprised how close we were. We haven't veered too far off our original pitch, our original idea. We've added to it, obviously, but the bones of the story are still there. I'll give you a quick aside about some of the early ideas in our development with Wayne and Di here in Cape Town. Is I'd been up to Lisa's facility, and she's got animals all over. She's a rehab facility, so obviously, but she had a number of domestic Sphinx cats, those hairless cats. And I was fascinated by their characters and their attitudes. I love cats particularly, but we thought of telling the story as through the cat's eyes, that they would be the narrators. And Ruth kind of liked that idea when we mentioned it to her. She's got a very quirky sense of humor. But Suzanne sort of leavened our laughter and our excitement a little bit by saying PBS Nature probably wants something a little more conventional. So the cats never made it to the final pitch. But by the time I pitched to Peter, it was fairly solid conventional narrative with a narrator voice holding the viewer's hands, that sort of story.
Yeah, I think video is really important, and I kind of don't remember, you know, commissioning editors have this phrase, getting sizzled, where someone produces such a compelling pitch that they buy the story. I don't remember being sizzled. I think it was part of the package. As I said, the still photographs you had of the pangolin were interesting because it really made me focus on this kind of unique species that's a throwback to the dinosaur age. I mean, so strange. I think that really helped. And then your description of your unique access to this, you know, rescue foundation in Zimbabwe. I think that's what drew me in.
Yeah.
Great.
Next question.
Any suggestions of tools that you used to help you as you were developing the script and the pitch for Peter beyond the course, which is very recommended?
I would just say rely on my course.
Or like software, anything that you use to work on the pitch deck?
No,
Anything? Okay.
I need to get really emotionally immersed in the story. I mean, I get so many pitches where people rip off page one and say, "Oh, I've got another pitch for you." Well, you know, it doesn't do it for me, but it might do it for another buyer. You never know.
A question about the new Netflix documentary that will be released next week called Pangolin Kulu's Journey. Did it make it more difficult to find funding with this project already in the pipeline, or what happened with that?
Not for me at all. We don't go out on PBS for a year, and PBS has a very distinctive audience. I'd say for a mid-priced nature documentary, the PBS nature audience is larger than Netflix, although it's not a hot brand. So we're where we want to be, and we'll go out in February 2026. Did you have any thoughts? Did it make any difference to your development and production of the story, Bruce?
No, not at all. It's a very small film community here in South Africa, and we know Pippa Ehrlich, who directed that, and I went to the screening of the first screening of it here in Cape Town a couple of weeks ago, and it's a beautiful film. They've really done a wonderful job, but it's different. It's a very different film to ours, and quite frankly, having got involved in the whole pangolin conservation world now, the more films about this animal that get out there on major platforms, the better for the animal. And so we're very, we're very excited that there's another film out there that's going to tell the story. And as Peter pointed out, the Netflix audience and the PBS audience are very different. So it's got a broader reach. The pangolin story will have a broader reach eventually. And so yeah, look out for it. It's a good movie.
Yep.
I'm excited to see it. How long did it take to edit?
We started editing in August, and first delivery was we were planning to deliver in December finish it before Christmas. But there were a few sort of hiccups in that initial process, mostly just around the relationships. How do we interpret what the notes that we got? And but the big feature was that PBS weren't pushing us. They said rather get it done, get it right. And so we eventually delivered early in March this year. So it took about off and on about 6 months.
Yeah, PBS were very patient. They knew that this was a new relationship, and they wanted to get the film right in the time that it took to get it right. So
it was an amazing learning experience working with them. They were always incredibly professional and positive, and they basically liked what we delivered up front, and were very constructive and helpful, in all our viewings and all our note sessions. So one hears of tricky negotiations going on in that phase, and staff, personnel changing and everything, but we had none of that. We had a very, very relatively smooth process, and it's all come out quite happily in the end. They appear very happy with the film. We're happy with it, and now it's that third leg of the stool, the viewers to see if they are happy with it.
It just one observation I have about the editorial process. I watched it very carefully without intruding at any stage, but the comments were deep. They went right down to music beats, which beat should be, attached to which, moment of the footage, etc., etc. So it was a very deep, engaged process that involved lots of very experienced people. And that's the beauty of working with the PBS team and the Terramata team, including Ruth.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, this is another good question for you, Bruce. For someone with a scientific background but shifting career, what advice would you offer for a beginner aspiring nature documentarian?
A science background shifting into documentaries. Play to your strengths. That's what I'd say. And then collaborate with people who have strengths that you don't have. I'll give you an example, personal example. I'm good at relationships, but I'm not good at money. So Di is fabulous with money, and so we collaborated, and that's how this film really, really got made. And Wayne is unbelievably tech-driven and tech-savvy and wonderful cameraman himself, and he plans down to the nth degree, and I'm a bit looser, and so we decided early on in the process that we were three filmmakers making a film, and we had different strengths, and so that was a way of getting the film done. If we could collaborate, then the film would be greater than the sum of its parts. So if you're a scientist, find a great storyteller. If you have an instinct for stories, you'll instinctively know when someone's a really, really good storyteller, and then find a good producer, and it would be, it's no one is perfect in every way. Filmmaking cannot be a one-man show ever. So simple answer, I suppose, would be collaboration.
Yeah, and I would say, how do you find people to collaborate? You're not going to find them in your basement writing email.
Yeah.
You have to get out of Dodge, I call it. So I would say, if your financial resources are limited, find the chapter of, say, women in film and video in your area and start going to their events, or do a postgraduate course at a respectable university. And if you have more financial resources, go to a big market like Real Screen or Sunny Side of the Dock or CPH in Copenhagen, whatever, just find a market that's accessible to you, and share the costs with a friend if you need to get an apartment or double up in a hotel room. Just do whatever it takes to just get out and start meeting people, because serendipity is just such a power. You never know which way a chance meeting is going to turn. That's how that's a lesson that I've lived my life. But you've got to get out, meet people, start finding people to discuss projects with, and potentially find partners.
Yeah.
All right, we've got about 20 more minutes of Q&A. I'd like to ask that our questions focus on this story. We've got a couple questions about the course, which are great, but we've got Bruce and Peter here, so please ask them how this project came to be. I have a question to get everyone thinking. What was your process using archival material?
often the archive was used to inspire us rather than use it. It was gathered by, it was, all the archive material was gathered by the monitors in the field. So it was amateur footage. Really, they were just recording events, not trying to shoot a movie. When I started working with Lisa's partner in the foundation that she started is Ellen Connolly, who's a zoologist and a real nuts and bolts, wonderful, wonderful woman. Early on in the process, I said to her, if you do nothing else for us, just shoot in landscape, please, not in portrait. and to her undying credit, she helped us out by shooting landscape forever after that. But as I said, the footage, the archive was often used to inspire us. What shots did we want to try and get? How did we want to get them? And then of course we did use some that were just, you could, it's a classic case of the content is king, you know. It might be poorly shot or whatever, but the content was just amazing, so we would include those. It's a sort of slowly catch the monkey kind of idea. You look at each piece of your story and what does it need visually, and then see how, if you've got something like that, or do you create it. We used an interesting, as I said earlier, Lisa and Ellen were getting pangolins into the facility while we were there, and so we were able to follow the course of a pangolin arriving, being examined in the early stages of rehab. And we would say, you know, well, this is what's happening now, but when Kosha came in so many years ago, it wasn't like this at all. She responded differently, and it was very tricky, but we learned so much from her. She was such a good teacher for us, because she was such a strong character, that she did exactly what she wanted to do, when she wanted to do it, how she wanted to do it. And so we learned so much from her that we're now far more adept and capable and agile in terms of dealing with these guys that come in. So that was how we told Kosha's story in the present, if that makes sense.
You should have given her a producer credit instead of you, maybe.
As I said, Peter, it's a collaborative affair.
And Bruce, on that note, is this the film as you delivered it? Is that how you thought it would be?
Oh, it's much better than I thought it would be. I mean,
Awesome.
Everyone's contributions has made it pretty special. But what's special for me is that Lisa's happy with it. It's her life's work that we've been able to dig into and put up on screen. It's a tribute to this woman and her team who've just achieved remarkable, and continue to. They work, their lives are their pangolins, and that's why they're so protective of the space, of allowing people in to maybe, you know, disrupt their routines, which are incredibly tough and rigorous, or tell their story in a way that isn't authentic or doesn't help them, you know. So yeah, it's been a...
Bruce, I would add one thought, is that in answer to that question, is that I thought there was a lot of risk in the film itself. And the reason for that is that there is a reason why so much wildlife film is about the big five, whales, blah, 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 polar bears, like enormous mammals. I mean, they are the foundation of the wildlife genre. And a small little, you know, scaly animal that lives in a burrow and doesn't come out too often is a pretty hard one to get right, you know, to get a create story, to create a character that you start to identify with, that isn't, you know, and it's not a creature with big eyes like a teddy bear. It's a very subtle process that you actually come to fall in love with Kosha, and wish her on through her journey. So I thought there was
Yeah.
no risk, and right through until the editing phase, I just really hoped that we would deliver it, and we did, or you did.
Yeah, you're right, Peter. It's not one of the big iconic creatures out in the wild that need help, and this is why once I got involved in Eye of the Pangolin, and we called it Eye of the Pangolin because once you look into the animal's eye, the fact that it's undeniable that there's lots going on there. They're remarkably intuitive and intelligent, and then you watch their behavior and how they can manipulate you. Lisa talks in the film about how they wrap you around their little finger, and they get to know you so well. And so my passion for them, my passion for telling their story is about the creature, the small little odd little creature, as you say. And then the way Warren Smart and Wayne who filmed it, the way they were able to draw this out, Lisa said right from the start, you've got to get down and look at the animal from a low angle, and that they did that so magnificently, and that's the reason that this character, and you'll see it in it's not just our film, you'll see it in Pippa's film as well, the Kulu film. The way they were able to shoot it is they're unbelievable characters. So being given a chance like they are in our film and Pippa's film is gonna allow people to actually develop a connection with them, which is, I'll never forget Craig Foster saying in an interview after My Octopus Teacher that if people can connect with nature, if they fall in love with the natural world, then they won't do things which destroy it or harm it. And that's been a sort of rule of thumb for me in all my natural history work, is to allow people to develop connections with the wild or the wild creatures. And yeah, I think you're right, Peter. They've done a great job with showing these little guys. And that as a review I read about the Kulu story said, the problem is now everyone's going to want to raise a pet pangolin. And Lisa said that, they're incredibly cute once you get to know them, and it is a problem if people do think they can raise them, because they're incredibly sensitive and tricky they don't survive in captivity. And if we've told our story properly and authentically, people will get that, but they're not pets. They won't survive as pets at all.
Thought never occurred to me. I thought from the beginning, my takeaway from the film is that this is an immense struggle to work with this little creature to bring her back to the wild, and there's no other option. So any more questions?
Yep.
There, Caitlin?
I've got 2 more questions. So if you have any burning questions, please put them in the chat. It's your moment. On that last note, Bruce, Diane's asking, how do you balance telling a feel-good, positive story without losing that very important message of how dire the situation is for pangolins? Did you have any trouble with that?
Yeah. In this film, we definitely wanted to stay on the positive side, make it it was also, we were guided in that by PBS, who they know their audiences. They've been producing top natural history films for 30 years, won many awards. They wanted their audiences to get a particular angle on the story, so it was easy to keep it on that side. Scales, on the other hand, is looking very, very clearly at why this trade is happening, why these animals are, and it's very easy to make black and white snap judgments and point fingers. And that's a much trickier tightrope to walk than we had in Kosha. And sometimes, you know, there's a place for both in my opinion, you know.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Totally. And is there anything you would do differently if you were starting on the Kosha journey now?
Oh, if it could have taken, you know, 2 or 3 years instead of 4 or 5 years, I don't know how I would have how we would have changed that. But in terms of the outcome, no, we're all very happy with the outcome. So
It is what it is. We
yeah,
were who
it
we
is.
were, and we did what we could. And there's no template for success. I mean, there are, you know, key success factors along the way, but it's not GPS. You really got to find your way, and we did.
Yeah.
We're going to publish a detailed case study, which we're working on now, about the history of the film. And that'll be published on my documentary business newsletter, and all republished or co-published on Desktop Documentaries. And that'll have...
We'll make sure to include the tech specs.
All the tech specs, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any last questions? Thanks everyone for joining us today. This is being recorded, so you can catch up later. Everyone,
Yes, thank you everyone for being interested in this film. It's an important film, and we hope it makes an impact with people out there. So thanks for taking this interest tonight.
Yes, thank you, Bruce. It's really, I think it's a wonderful story. It's a story about a little animal that punches above its weight, and it's a story about a filmmaking team that punched above our weight. So, you know, well done. I'm really proud to work with you on this.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah,
Likewise.
we're all excited to see it. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll catch you next time.